Hi Anti-Society, welcome back to the Antisocial Planet. Today we are getting into some more Dreamcatcher with Odd Eye, and I pulled up the lyric video for this. And y'all, Handong is back, which I feel like maybe that's spoiling it a little bit, but I feel like I've already either seen clips or heard conversation about Handong's coming back and the reveal with the mask. I'm assuming that's gonna be the moment. Maybe I'm not spoiling it for myself anyway, but I was just excited to finally get to see all of them when I pulled up the lyric video because it's been a minute. I did have some moments in between of them doing new stuff, so I feel like that kind of helped me from missing Handong too much, but I'm so excited that she's gonna be in the songs again because her voice is just sorely missed. And I know there's versions of the songs that have all of them performing in it in live performances, so I'll definitely have to check those out at some point, but exciting days. So we're just gonna get into listening to the song first with the lyric video, and then we'll get to the music video, but extra hype this time. Oh, it's so exciting to see everybody where they should be together. Xian in this picture though, dang, Sua too. Okay, I don't know, we're not gonna even focus on that. We're here for the song and to be excited that we are finally 7 again. Ooh. That's an interesting synth. Ooh, okay. Interesting to pull back again. They've done that a couple of times with this new era of their music of having these ballad deliveries in the verses, and then I haven't heard the chorus yet, but I'm assuming we're gonna get into something that's a little bit heavier for their rock sound that they're inspired by. Gorgeous vocals all around. This light falsetto that we're getting for one, except for Handong, who dug into her lower range, which I always like when that happens. Interesting to see Open Your Eyes. Again, Dreamcatcher, they have a lot of sleep imagery and choosing to be in dream and sleep and escaping into those dream realms a little bit. Interesting to have. Usually when they talk about opening their eyes or waking up, it is in direct contrast to that story and needing to face what's actually happening as opposed to avoiding it, turning away from it. This is the brilliant place where everyone hoped to be is interesting too, especially with Boca being the one before this, right? Pulling a lot on social media and the way that people talk about you. And we had the headlines and like the newspapers and stuff like that in the music videos. So going from that and like facing the way that people like to talk a lot of bad things about sharing their unsolicited opinions or being more aggressive in the anonymity of social media, and then moving on to a place where it's opening your eyes and actually seeing something that's better, the progression there, especially since in the previous album there were moments in the songs where they talked about, hey, we get to choose what is expected, right? One of the things that people say all the time is like, oh, they agreed to be an idol, which means that they've agreed to have people be hateful towards them or mean to them or to treat them poorly on social media. I'm like, no, they haven't. No, they didn't. They agreed to be idols. They agreed to be singers and performers. They did not agree to deal with waves of people being awful to them, completely unfounded. So it's interesting then to pull from that of having a song where they're like, if we could just choose, that's not the normal thing. We can just choose that we want to do something better and not just like let it be and like shrug it off because that's the way it's always been. Like we get to choose the change in the future. So it seems like we're progressing to this, I know, idyllic after moment, like almost like them visualizing what comes afterwards. Maybe that's just, I'm just guessing. Gayan's a bit of in the lower range too. Ooh, I'm facing a lie though. Ooh. Ooh. Ooh, that's haunting. Ooh, no, okay. Thami, you're gonna have to wait your turn. I have to go back because there's no way that I was able to keep up with everything that just happened. Lyrically, sonically, vocally, I was just like, I'm gonna let it play because I don't know how to interrupt that. But then I was also like, I can't pay attention to one thing fully at all. So we have this turning point of I'm facing a lie within this hope. So I was talking before about how it seems like they're almost having this optimistic vision of what they want to be like the after of all of this. They're pointing out, okay, here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong within the industry, and using social media media and what it means to be like a public figure. And I feel like with social media, that's shifting because lots of people can just post whatever they want. I am posting whatever I want, regardless of, I don't have any backing from a production company or traditional media in some way. So the average person, in a way, becomes almost like a public figure in a certain way because they can share whatever they want, however they want. And because of that, lots of people end up getting a certain amount of popularity or making a living. Just because you don't make like millions of dollars doesn't mean that you can't make a living off of posting stuff online at this point. So it's a completely different landscape. And that means that a lot of people also have to face judgment and ridicule and hate from people that they otherwise would not have any kind of contact with. It's more of a universal experience than it used to be in like traditional media and stuff. It's almost like them pointing out how there's all of these flaws in that experience and how, because it's such a new thing, we get to choose what the foundation of that is. We get to choose what the expected almost manners of it is, right? What is the decorum of being online and using social media? And it's a bit of a wild west for the last little bit, but it doesn't have to continue to be that way. At a certain point, we get to regulate that, or at least have some kind of agreement between ourselves of how we treat people online. And as it becomes more of a universal experience, it's not just from their perspective as an idols, it's more widely seen. So it's like them saying, hey, I have this vision of what it could be on the other side. And they even talk about utopia, right? At the end of the chorus there. So it's like they have this vision of it, but it's getting there that's the difficult part, right? Them talking about, I'm facing a lie within this hope, and they talk about lies and deceiving smiles and all of this. There's all of these kind of barriers to that. It could also just be people not needing to be genuine online either. People don't have to share photos of what's actually going on in their life. They don't have to make videos about what's going on in their life. They don't have to actually share opinions that they have, right? So just because people are conveying a certain thing online, even if they are supporting someone online, it doesn't mean that necessarily they believe that too, right? And you can have a certain relationship with parasocial relationship with someone, but you don't actually know them. And it's just, I don't know, I feel like there's so many ideas there, and that's just me like pulling from like lyrical content. We're not even getting to the fact that it's like this techno beat, which I just think is great given the like technology that's being used throughout like the storytelling of this part, and the vocals as well. The vocals are always great, but like the darker part sounding vocal at the beginning and then like building up into these more like floaty vocals, I don't even know, because like I couldn't process everything all at once. We're gonna listen to it again though. Nice clip delivery too. Like gorgeous and haunting. Oh, there's a wind up. Ooh, okay, okay, Handang, sweetie, I definitely want to hear your voice because missed you so much. But I love how pulled back the production is here, especially after that huge build up in the chorus. I also love that we have reverb turned up at the end of her phrases because it just adds this, again, this techno feel to the production. So it's this filtered, processed digital sound that I think is really interesting too, because it's talking in the lyrics, they talk about falling deeper in, which I feel like is probably, if we're still going with social media and that experience, it's like social media is built to be addictive and to be something that you fall back on all the time. So it can be really easy to want to engage with it, see what's happening, look at what other people are doing, watch the numbers go up on your posts and read comments. And it can be something that is very difficult to just leave, right? To just post something and walk away is really difficult. A lot of us post something and then, let's face it, we all like lurk around for a little bit just to see what happens, right? Even if it's not, us lurking around isn't going to actually do anything, right? It's not going to make a better reception for it. It's not going to make us reach higher numbers or more engagement or whatever. But we all do it because there's this immediate reward of getting to see people like the thing that you've posted, right? It's interesting. And even though I feels like I'm in the same place after all of the stuff that they've said, after all of the different iterations throughout the story of them fighting back and standing their ground, and even in Boca of them being like, in the album from Boca anyway, of them saying, hey, we get to choose what we do next. We get to choose to be better to each other and to choose something that is from a place of compassion with each other, even in online spaces. And I think we can all agree that social media hasn't really gotten better. It still feels like a Wild West, even though we've had it for a while, even though it's definitely past the beginning upswing that happened in the late 2010s. But there's still lots of it that is not great and not well monitored. And there's like a whole different layer to social media and digital content and stuff that we're like constantly trying to figure out day to day. And we don't really know what's going to happen with it. It can feel very overwhelming, and we haven't actually gotten anywhere. Even though I'm throwing a useless fit, I keep saying, I don't want this, we need to change, this is wrong, and no one's listening, no one's paying attention, no one's actually doing anything to change it. Love that pulsing synth. Also the chasing after Mirage. Good imagery. Oof, vocals. Okay, I know the drop's coming and I'm interrupting, but I was just thinking that it becomes even more clever. My mistake. It makes me think of algorithms, what we get shown. A lot of engaging with social media, I know I'm focusing on that point for the song, but a lot of our experience with social media is extremely passive, right? Algorithms get to choose what we're engaging with, especially with something like TikTok, right? TikTok, you just scroll forever and whatever it shows you is what it shows you, right? As opposed to something like YouTube where you have a little bit more of a choice in that, right? You can search things on TikTok, but how many of us actually do that? A lot of us just go to your For You page and scroll forever, right? Whereas YouTube, you go to the homepage, you get shown a variety of things that are being recommended to you. You can put on like autoplay or whatever, but there is a little bit more of a deliberate choice in that engaging with that. It's still passive because it's still the algorithm recommending stuff to you, but it's interesting to be like, it becomes more clever. It does, right? Every time social media gets a new iteration, it becomes better at it. We can talk about some of the social media that was popular in 2018, 2019 compared to like now. I mean, I bring up TikTok specifically. Like the reason that TikTok has become such a big thing is because it's very good at quickly learning what kinds of stuff that you like and the kind of stuff that you're going to engage with and look at for the longest and offering that to you, right? So it's a platform that a lot of people gravitate to because it's very quick at learning the kinds of stuff that you want to see, curating the algorithm for you, as opposed to some other social media sites where it takes a little bit longer for it to learn that. It keeps getting more and more clever the more iterations that we have with social media and the more that companies figure out how to leverage that. So it's interesting. All of like the lyrical stuff here too. I feel like there's probably stuff that I'm missing and I could dig more into, but I'm a little bit overwhelmed because sonically, I love the darker sound that we get hit with after this build up once we get into the chorus. So many cool like little synth sounds too. I was hoping to get a Handong part there.
조금씩 사라져가는 걸멈 나를 따라만 오는 줄 알았던 그림자를 따라가는 듯이 바꾸지 못하는 운명 속에 희망은 더 사라져가.
Ooh, okay. Ooh, we're getting some vocals layered up. Okay, I'm excited. But love how they keep coming back to this idea of they can see a future, right? Which is Odd Eye. I'm assuming the reason for Odd Eye is they're talking about how they can see a utopia, an ideal dream, an ideal future. They have a vision, which is name dropped to another song, but they have a vision for what could possibly be, and it's being corrupted by the reality around them, or they keep involuntarily acting in ways that don't really reflect wanting to do that. Like this line here of, I thought the shadow was following me, but I'm following it, right? This idea of, I thought thought that this negativity, this despair they talk about in the chorus as well, was something that was following me while I went about my life. But in reality, I'm like engaging with it, right? I'm following with it instead. And that can be, again, I feel like I'm leaning maybe too much into the social media part of it, but I feel like it's definitely something that we do, is that we engage with what sparks the heightened emotion in us. And there's not really a difference between extreme joy and despair and anger and sadness that something can engage with us. The reason that the majority of news that we see is awful, terrible things going on in the world is because that's the thing that people engage with, right? If happy news got more engagement, that's what would be all over the news networks. But it doesn't. People have tried it. There's entire news organizations that have tried to only do positive, good news that they deliver, and they just can't sustain themselves because no one wants to pay attention to that. They want to know about all of the awful things going on in the world, right? So it's one of those things where we've created that reality with the way that we engage with media, and not just on social media, but before that, the way that we engage with any kind of media is what ends up being served back to us. So it's just interesting to have this constant back and forth of, I can see this potential ideal dream, I hope for change impatiently, but at the same time there's this conflict between those two things of what I hope for and then the actual things that are surrounding me, the behavior that I find myself in, and the stuff that we engage with, right? We can all sit here and be like, oh yeah, I would love to get to see what was great stuff was going on in the world, instead of all of this awful news and all these terrible things going on. If we wanted to see that, if enough of us who say that actually wanted to see that, that would be what was shown to us. But it's not. Anything's coming up on your algorithm that you're like, oh, this, I don't want to see, this angers me. The reason that it's there is because you keep engaging with stuff like that. You're the reason it's there. You can just keep scrolling, you can click away, you can say that you don't want to see content like that anymore. You're the one engaging with it. Even talking before in Boca of people saying harmful things towards anyone on social media, whether or not it's Dreamcatcher or other idols, or just in general. Every time that you write a comment, a hateful comment on a piece of media online that you don't like, they're going to show more of that to you, because you're telling because the algorithm doesn't know if a comment is negative or positive. It just knows that it's a comment. Same thing on YouTube. YouTube doesn't know the difference between a thumbs up and a thumbs down on a video. It just knows that you've clicked some button on it. So it weighs them the same way. So if you keep disliking a video, more of those videos are just going to keep being shown to you. So it's just interesting to have that, I don't know, thrown in there. I don't know if I have a coherent thought. I feel like I'm like a little bit overwhelmed sonically. I'm so happy to see Handong, but I feel like there's so much going on lyrically that I'm just like, pulled into it.
그림자를 따라가는 듯이 바꾸지 못하는 운명 속에 희망은 더 사라져
Yeah, they're like, in this destiny I cannot change. Ooh. Ad-libs though. Ooh, interesting back and forth too. That line that's in the chorus, again, back and forth of things get better, things get worse. The vision that you have for the future versus your actual behavior, or the things that you're surrounded by. The way that we can all say, yes, I would love for there to be less awful, hatred-filled things on the internet. I would love to see positive things going on in the world instead of negative things. But that doesn't reflect the stuff that we engage with. That doesn't reflect the way that we react, right? Even if you see a negative comment on something, you feel this need to defend the thing that you like, right? Us as K-pop fans, right? If we see someone being like, oh, I'm going to say something hateful or awful about this group that you happen to love, you feel defensive. You feel like you have to engage with that. But that means that you're like making that post and that comment more seeable, right? The algorithm's gonna be like, oh, more people like this comment, so I'm gonna show it to more people. I'm gonna put it near the top of the post. I'm gonna make sure that more people see this post, right? Which is not what you want when you're like, oh, I actually want to defend this group. But we feel that way in direct emotional response to seeing that. And in reality, if we just didn't engage, it would be fine. If we only engaged with the stuff that was like positive, then that would be what was more popular. So the fact that we have this negativity that becomes popular is because of our own actions. Again, that back and forth of contradictory of each other and paradoxes within ourselves that we can't really help. It's one thing to say that we want this and that, and to say that we can envision a certain kind of future. And it's another thing to actually have actions that align with that. And it's difficult to do that, right? Especially if the things that get shown generally to everyone when something goes viral, that's just based on how many people are engaged engaging with it. It doesn't matter if you've curated your algorithm to show you specific things. If something goes viral, you're probably going to run into it in some way. So, ooh, there's so many things. I feel like there's so many lyrical things that I could pull into that I got distracted by that. But great song. They all sound fantastic. Love the lower ranges mixed with those very floaty, beautiful, haunting vocals and some of the ad-libs that they were doing. Love all the little techno sounds and then getting more electronic instruments, but more classically rock associated instruments like the electric guitar and stuff coming in the chorus. So just being like a little bit more grounded in the sound as opposed to having like all these little electronic synth sounds that were oscillating in the back of the mixing and stuff. I feel like my brain is just like, there's so many things that I want to focus in on and I have to pick and choose with first listen and first reaction. But I'm excited to see the music video and see how they pull some of the other images through of the contrast between nature and technology and stuff like that. I'm too excited for this music video. Okay. This is interesting. Almost like pod? Looks like a mask though. With the chalice? God, she looks great. I mean, give it, but ooh. How'd you put in slow-mo in? Ooh, wait. There was either a compilation video or in the guide where I said something about the red outfits and I really liked them forever ago. Is this the MV with the red outfits? Because it looks like it is. I know they've worn red in other things as well, but I remember specifically being like, dang, what's this one? Because this is lots of the red contrasting with this very monochrome for the rest of it, right? Also, this mirrors almost on the top of this performing space. The reflection on the floor and the roof is really cool too. Not to interrupt immediately, but that just thought. Nah. Ooh, love all the hand details. Ooh, the tree again. With the like neon lights? With the phones. Ooh, okay, I know I'm interrupting right away. right before we get into it. Gosh, these outfits though. Anyway, these outfits too. But the having the phones and having it distort the reality around them. Even the tree had these neon lights, it almost looks like it's plugged in, right? So it's almost this being tainted by technology or needing to be like connected in. It's like a darker color too. In Boca, it was very much flourishing and healthy and all that. And this has like the red tint to it. So it almost looks like it's been corrupted or dying in some way, maybe? I don't know yet. The graffiti too. Almost like running away to be able to check your phone. We've all been there. Ooh. Ma'am. Both of you. Sheesh. Xian in this though. Okay, they all look great, but sad because everything is happening. Here again, we had Xian in Boca as well, where she had all of the screens behind her. So it's almost like even after everything that happened in Boca, again, they're like back where they started, right? Like we had with Thami's verse of her talking about, I feel like I haven't gone anywhere. I feel like I'm back to where I was before. It's almost like they're still stuck in these isolated parts, right? Like I was talking about in the Boca MV about how it feels like they have like with their own individual scenes, it feels very isolated and disconnected from each other. And then the only time that they were like together was in the dance sequences. And even the sets themselves feeling like they're on like a sound stage and not having the same like scope as some of their other settings that they've had in their music videos, feels like they're literally stuck in this box, stuck in this confined reality, as opposed to actually being able to like venture around and be part of an actual landscape, right? Which is interesting. I think I had other thoughts in there somewhere, but I don't have them anymore. In my defense, Yehyun looked at me like that and I was like, oh, wait, hang on. Yeah, it's on like a platform? The tree? No. Ooh. God, she looks beautiful. Ooh. Does the writing say something specific? Not to like immediately go back on Kandang and how good she looks this outfit with the blue hair contrasting with the red. But I thought it was interesting at the phone, almost like we've had the mask where they've covered half of their face. So instead of covering with their hand or a mask, it's like a phone, like masking yourself in the way that you represent yourself through social media or through technology, because it has a certain anonymity to it. It has a very curated feeling to it. So you get to choose what kind of personality or image you portray through the way that you curate your social media. And then people get to take that however they want, right? Having that image is really interesting. Oh, just like the distortions in reality, all of the flashing lights are a little bit much for me as someone who's a little bit light sensitive, so that's making it a little bit overwhelming for my brain. But all these little distortions of overlays in the music video is really cool too. They're like choosing to engage with their phones and stuff. It's distorting literally the way that they look at the world and the way that the world looks at them. And even having really dark lighting in this scene, and where Gio was with the tree behind her, still a very dark setting, is interesting too, to have those very moody dark settings for how they are engaging with technology. It's definitely not painted in a positive light, even just aesthetically. With that like point of light being the device. Yes, does the writing mean something specific? Gayan. Ooh. Interesting too. Okay, having the red is very interesting, just in general, the contrast there, but it makes me think of a couple of different things: Poison Chalice, or even Holy Grail, but corrupted in some way, right? And definitely correct me if I'm wrong about my understanding of Holy Grail mythos and stories and whatnot, but I feel like there's a certain association with only the worthy will benefit from it. If you drink from the Holy Grail when you don't actually have pure intentions, or you are not worthy of it, it either won't work for you or it'll have a further corrupting effect on you. Again, vaguely pulling from that. Also love that we have the emojis, the stickers on her face. Again, social media affecting literally the way that she presents herself to the world and the way that the world sees her. Even the setting here of a very normal room, but there's a certain isolation to this, very much has pop culture references in it as well, engaging with posters and the images that are portrayed to us of certain people and media, and the images that we choose to represent our personalities, right? Like you put posters up on your wall because you're like, hey, these are the things that I like, but it's a very simplistic, literally like 2D representation of who you are as a person. But at a cursory glance, it's like a little bit of an icebreaker, maybe? I don't know. The two eyes too, like odd eye, and they have the two colored contacts. Oh, I love that move. I've seen like clips of it, but ooh, they're like having her hands on the throat of her reflection. Ooh. Sua though. Okay, I have a couple of things. We go with the remote. Sua looking great in general. Just need to point that out specifically. This is a great shot. There's some great use of color in this too. I talked about in the Boca MV, but definitely coming through in this as well. Love the two colored contacts. They're literally seeing two different versions, two different paths. It's almost like having two images overlapping with each other. Also makes me think of 3D, where you have to have the two different color images to make something like look 3D through the right lens, switching something from 2D to 3D if you look at it with the right tools or in the right way. Maybe I'm reaching too much with that one, but that's what it makes me think of. Ooh, I had another thought randomly because we had the clap part there with Sua where they cut the scene, which is just cool editing. But there was also a part way earlier, and I forgot to mention it because I got overwhelmed by everything, but they have the Boca hand movement. I think Yuhyun did it for one of her parts. And I just remembered, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk about that. I think that they brought some of that choreo forward, which I think is really interesting too. I probably had other thoughts, but this is very overstimulating, which I feel like is probably the point. Like the point is probably the amount of stuff being thrown and overlays and colors and lights and changing scenes is what it feels like to engage with social media. It's just things being thrown at you over and over and over again, and you don't even have time to really register it before the next thing gets shown to you, which is very overwhelming in and of itself. So it's thrown me a little bit for a loop. That's how my brain works, but it's also, I think, a great representation of what they're trying to convey with the music video. See, that's a cool cut. Ooh, Dami. Great use of reflections. Uh-oh. Looks like the tree just died. Ooh, good cut between those two. Ooh, I just got shivers. Dang, okay. It's different with the choreo. Okay. I find it very interesting that there's a lot of clips in this where we have Kandang almost like protected. We have her in the one room with all of the curtains or drapes or whatever around her. She's got the white on, more ethereal looking, and seems to be in like a much brighter setting than the rest of them are. I was talking about how a lot of them in their isolated scenes have a very dark feeling to them. So having Kandang in like direct contrast to that, and I feel like that's very interesting given that she has not been here for the previous music videos, so her character is definitely going to have a different role in the overall story because they have to differentiate her from the other ones because she has not been like part of the whole narrative. So I think it's interesting to have this almost barrier around her now, and again very light in the way that it works as opposed to some of the other ones having the tree bleached of its color. We have some great distortion around the edges of the screen in some of the scenes too, like you don't even like really notice if you're focusing at like the front, but there's like this distortion of everything kind of drawing inwards, which is very interesting too, is like you get sucked into social media or the way that you engage with technology that you forget that like the rest of the world exists outside of the screen. Oh, there's definitely another, oh, the burning almost a picture around Gayen for some reason makes me think, well, we've had lots of water imagery in this, so having the fire and contrast is interesting, but it makes me think of Nightmare storyline for some reason. I don't know at what part, but I feel like there's something with Gayen that is related to that specifically. Maybe I'm just thinking like pictures on the wall was very much used in that storyline, so that's what it makes me think of. I don't know anymore. My brain's all over the place. There's so much going on. She's literally like reaching into the screen. Whew, that part though. Ooh, the blindfolds. No, this Xian though. It almost looked like they're falling into like the pupil, an eye. Ooh. Uh-oh. That makes me nervous. It's like they couldn't find it. I mean, I guess it's dystopia, so I'm like, it probably wasn't gonna have a happy ending. Dang. It's so interesting too to have them reaching out to it, right? Like we have Xian where she's dropping the remote, but then she ends up reaching out to it anyway. We have Gayen who reaches into the screen and then immediately is overwhelmed by it and is seeing the regret there, which I think is very much what we have, right? Like you're opening up your social media on your phone before you even think about it, right? Like you're waiting in line for something, you're just sitting around trying to watch something, and then you pick up your phone and you're like scrolling through it, even though you're already watching a piece of media. We don't even think about it. We just mindlessly, through muscle memory, end up there. And it's not even something that we're consciously choosing anymore. And it may not be how we want to spend like the next hour of our life, or, you know, it may not make us happy in the end, or it may not show us stuff that we actually want to see, but we just end up there and we're like, actually, and like a couple hours later, you come out of your doom scrolling and you're like, actually, no, that's not how I wanted to spend my evening. Like I could have hung out with friends. I could have done a hobby. I could have, you know, engaged with a piece of media that actually made me happy, and instead I did that instead, and I like, that's not what I wanted, but it's too late, you've already spent that time. So it's like, whew, I feel like there are so many things that I could pull apart in this. I might need a few passes. Downside of a first reaction is I can only just rapidly put out whatever I see, and I can't really condense them down into something coherent, overarching, because I just have to hope that I point out something that becomes important later on. But I feel like there's so many things, like lyrically there's so much richness in the storytelling that they're trying to have here. Visually there's so much going on in this music video, which I feel like is very intentional, of the kind of like overstimulation and so much being thrown at you through the way that we use technology at this point that it's too overwhelming. There's too much to engage with and to see, and it's completely overwhelming to engage with technology at this point for, I think, majority of people, and yet we keep falling back to it, right? Because it's such a useful thing, because it does give us that dopamine hit, because it makes us feel informed, because it does connect us in some ways, and there are good things about it, but there are also negatives. And I think that recognizing that both exist and figuring out how to navigate that, and hopefully at some point lean more towards the positive, I think is where we're in this weird impasse right now. I know that this is from a few years ago. Even then they were like, hey, sound the alarm, there's some crazy stuff going on with this, and we're still battling through that now as we get new technologies and engage with technology in a different way and social media in a different way, that we're running headfirst without really thinking about the consequences or the long-term effects of what we're doing. And I think that's something worth talking about and considering. And I don't know, I feel like there's my brain's just, I have too much that I could talk about and not enough brain power to fully put it together. Yeah, I feel like there's too much. I feel like there's a lot that I could talk about and pull apart, and I feel like I said a lot of it, but I feel like there's probably so many other things that I missed in this, and I think that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be too much for a first go, because I think because it's pulling off of like social media and technology and the way that we engage with it and the way that it isn't necessarily good for us, the way that it currently works, right? That it's supposed to be like too much for you to process in the moment. It's supposed to show as we quickly like shift from different things, and all of these different things get thrown at us through algorithms. We don't have enough time to actually process them and figure out what's going on and like critically think of, hey, is this how I want to be spending my time? Is this actually something that I want to engage with? Is this true? I think that's a big thing with technology, is like, what's even true, what isn't, who are experts, who aren't, who knows what they're talking about, who doesn't. And when anyone can pick up a phone and post something, record something, it means that there's just so much out there, and there's so much potential for people to get lost in it and to not really think about, what am I watching? What am I engaging with? And what are the things that are being said to me? And how are they being said to me? And what are the other perspectives? And I feel like there's so many different angles that I could pull this apart if I wanted to. And I simply do not have the time. I've already been recording for too long for this, but loved it overall. I think that it's a heartbreaking kind of end cap to this particular part of the story, to be like, in the end, they couldn't find utopia. In the end, that wasn't something that they were able to accomplish, and through the temptation of it, right? But I think this is the end of the dystopia, right? That's like, I was just checking there quickly. This is the official end to the dystopia storyline, and dystopia definitely doesn't say that we're going to end up somewhere good with the story, but I think that it's very reflective of what we're currently going through. Like I was saying, this is from a few years ago. Has it gotten better? Has our way of using social media and technology improved? I don't think so. I think we get into AI territory in the more recent years, and it's just become like more convoluted and confusing and overwhelming in the way that we're using technology, and whether or not it's ethical, or whether or not it might be faster, it might be more cost effective, but at what point do you completely lose the heart of the reason that we have social media to begin with, to connect people, to share ideas, to open up opportunities for people? What are the positives, and how do we leverage that more? And what are the negatives, and how do we tamper that down as much as possible? I don't know. I think that's a very complicated conversation to have, but I think that's very interesting that they decided to do this storyline at all and to lean into it, and in a very like timely way, given the kinds of stuff that was going on in the K-pop industry with social media around the time when they released all this stuff. I think that it was very much a conversation that everyone was suddenly very interested in having, and I think that it's something that we're continuing to have, of like, how do we use social media, how do we engage with it, and at what point do we need to get involved on a more systematic level, right? Companies getting involved on their artists' behalf and putting in government regulations, and how do you enforce those and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a larger conversation to this, and definitely let me know your ideas down in the comments. I really want to engage and pull into this more of what's even going on with this, and maybe give my brain a little bit of a break. But I hope you enjoyed listening to that along with me. You can click this place to go into my previous reactions, or you can subscribe to me next time I post a Dreamcatcher reaction. I will see you in the next video. Bye.